Right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the podcast. As promised, I'm doing this every day for 30 days. So I'm even wearing my shirt every day. And I'm actually in the apartment now. So this is actually a real living room setup or dining room or whatever it's called. Not a staged one down at the co-working space. But I've made a lot of progress on the podcast. So I'm just going to set down this tripod and show you what I did. So first things first, I created, if you're watching the video, if you're not watching the video, I'm going to tell you, and trust me, this will just be really quick. I created the Super Connectors podcast page on the website, and I uploaded the first episode in transistor.fm, which is the platform that I'm using. And I set up a email subscribe box in ConvertKit, which I put on my website. And I published the first episode as a blog post, and I put it on YouTube. So you could be listening to this on any various platform that does podcasts, and it could all be coming through. So let me set down my little Twitch pod thing here, give it a little adjustment, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this process of naming the podcast and how that all came together. So naming is a really important and really interesting part of design. And it's one of the things that, even if you already have like a name for your business, your project, your organization, whatever, you're going to have to name projects and programs and products or initiatives or events. So naming is something that never really ends. So it's cool to dig into the choices that come into play when you're creating a name. And I can recommend a really cool episode of 99% Invisible, which is a podcast that I just absolutely love. And it's a podcast all about design and the kinds of choices that go into the built environment and have shaped culture over time. And there's a whole episode about naming, and that's where I first understood that naming could be a specialty of its own, that there's actually agencies who are just naming studios, right? So that is incredibly interesting. But one thing that they really broke down was like there's names that are very descriptive. There's names that are, I don't know the exact word for this, but there's names that you just kind of come up with a name. I'm sure you can think of, I'm not going to name any brands here because I don't want to be that. Nobody's that. You can think of names that mean nothing, right? They're just invented. And then they almost become like the thing itself. And then there's also names where you take something that already exists and you like use it almost like a metaphor, right? And the name that I'm using for this podcast is Super Connectors. And I just like the way it sounds, like the way it rolls off the tongue, but it means something. It's both descriptive and it's somewhat of a metaphor. It's also a play on words because what's happening right now in the world is there's this massive revolution in computing, artificial intelligence, with content, the way that it's consumed, trusted, the way that people meet each other and connect with each other online is totally changing. Everything's completely being reinvented right now. I mean, it's like a really interesting time. And superconductors are actually a part of that, part of the physical environment of computing. And superconnectors is a phrase or a name or a term or whatever that I learned years and years ago when learning about networking, community organizing, community building. A way to describe the type of person who hosts events and really likes to introduce people to each other and keep aware of like who's who. They bring a real generous spirit. They're always listening for opportunity to connect people. They might host potlucks. They might facilitate meetings. They might initiate a conversation that otherwise would not have existed, to draw out things about people that are interesting and help them bond and connect with each other. So this idea of super connectors suddenly just hit me after the first episode. Because I've always been asking the question I ask every client when we work on their website or marketing campaign. The most important question is, who do you seek to serve? Who are the people that you work with? Who are your clients, your customers, your community members, the people who are visiting your website? Because you've got to build your world for them. You got to build value for them. You got to give them a reason to talk about what you do, to ask, engage with you, to participate. And so really web design is about connection. And today, more than anything, it's about connection. Content marketing, people used to say content is king. It was like how you could provide value. People would create content and say, I'm going to protect this. I'm going to put it behind a paywall. You got to sign up. You got to subscribe to get this content. Content is not as valuable. It's been on a decline for a while, but it's just not that valuable. People don't have a content problem. If anything, we have a problem of too much content. Now we have a discernment problem. We have a trust problem. We have a connection problem. So what we need to do as content becomes more abundant, less trustful, more confusing, is we need to bring our own perspectives to the table. We need to really prioritize what is it that makes us who we are and gives us the lens that we have with the world. And not just that, but who are we bringing together? How can we connect them with each other and help them see each other for what makes them unique? Connection is absolutely right now key. And if we're building an online presence, if we're building an online business, we're building courses, we should be building connection. We should be building community. This idea of community-powered courses and cohort-based courses really inspires me. And I brought my entire business and the work that I'm doing with clients in that directions. People that are doing webinars, like evergreen webinars that are automated and on repeat, not my clients. People that are building video courses that they sell and just set and forget aren't really my clients anymore. I'm really focusing on the people who are building cohorts that are using tools like facilitation and flipped classroom and breakout rooms and prompts. Those are my people. Those are the super connectors that I work with and that I'm here to serve. Now that clarity for me is really, really big because I used to wrestle with this question. Am I working with nonprofit directors or creators, small businesses or service providers? All those people have something to teach, have something to share. So I used to say, well, I work with people who have something to teach. I work with people who create courses or use education for, instead of marketing, instead of promotion. But really what I'm doing is the common problem that they all have that I'm feeling called to serve is how can they connect with the right people? How can they connect people to each other? And how can they build meaningful trust, relationships, and transformation? So that is what Super Connectors is all about. And now that I have the name, I have the direction, I was able to put together a logo very quickly in Canva that I'm happy with. Again, I'm using the spirit of iteration here, so I'll add new layers. I'll maybe make changes to it. Of course I will. Of course I will. That's why I shouldn't spend too much time on it now, because it is going to change eventually. And this podcast is really all about action, because what I've learned is that I was hiding behind my perfectionism for too long. And what I need to be doing is showing who I really am and just shooting from the hip a little bit, just being honest and being present. Because if I can be present, then I'm bringing that connection to you. I don't need to try to guess what you want to see and try to change who I am to fit something that I spend too much time trying to do that. And living in that place of insecurity and over-analyzing. And so I'm really going to let this be what it is in the early stages and see where it goes. So very few people will watch this first video. If you're watching this, you're one of those very few people, and I don't take it for granted. I think you're getting a choice now to, I guess I'm taking the risk of you seeing the early stages and feeling like guy doesn't really have his shit together, so why would I subscribe to this? Why would I come back to this? But I am really excited to show you what tools and framework I can bring to the table in this podcast, because it's what I've been refining one-on-one with clients, and I just haven't figured out how to bring it to a larger audience until now. And I'm really excited. If you are one of those people, those generous, creative, community-minded, change-making super connectors, then this is for you. And that's why I'm making this podcast. And it's because I know now the direction and the focus and who I'm talking to, that I feel like I can just speak and share. I'm really excited to bring that to you. So I'm just going to end this with a couple of logistics. Okay. So when coming up with a project name, when figuring that out, here's what I did. I looked to see what other podcasts are called super connectors. I was surprised. I couldn't find any other podcast called that. I found it in the description, how people describe themselves in a few different podcasts. So I immediately went to Canva. I created a logo. 3,000 by 3,000 pixels is what was recommended for podcast covers. I just followed the instructions on transistor.fm. That's the platform that I like. I host a few other podcasts there. So with one account, I can host multiple podcast feeds. They walked me through the steps 1, 2, 3 of getting it submitted to the different streaming services, gave me an RSS feed. I was able to connect it to ConvertKit or Kit, where I'm building my audience for this podcast and sending a newsletter. And I was able to build an embedded podcast player that I could put right on my website. So I even launched a page, which I'll put in the show notes. And I edited the podcast video in Descript. And because I have a lot of awkward room noise, I didn't bring my microphone with me to Minnesota for the summer. So I used Descript Studio Sound feature to update the sound, and I dropped in some music tracks on Descript. And I just kind of gave myself an hour, and I didn't want to spend too much more time than that on the episode. So I just threw it together. At some point, I'll record a little, opening line or something. But again, it's all about iteration. And I hope that if you could learn something from this, it's just go, 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 go. And I have to say that the decisions that I've made early on around the tools to use, those are actually pretty impactful and are worth giving some thought to in advance. So I'm happy to share that with you. But the other details don't really matter that much. The logo doesn't matter that much. The description doesn't matter. Video, audio quality, all that stuff doesn't matter as much. What matters is creating every day, getting into that pattern, being present, being connected. So welcome to Super Connectors, and check out the description for the updated breakdown of what I'm using if you want to borrow any tips from that. And in the next episode, I will be digging into, as promised, the framework for how I'm planning this out, because now that I have this clarity around the audience, again, lesson 1, part 1 of any project, who's it for? Now that I have that down, I can map out the rest of it, and I can show you what that looks like, and we can talk about that in a future episode. So thank you for being here. Thank you for hearing this story about the name and how it came about. And thank you for being a super connector yourself, kind of person that is generous and looks out for people. All right. See you in the next episode. I've been Ryan Clover for Super Connectors, and